FDA is continuing its review of a separate FDA-funded study that evaluated the risk of blood clots in users of several different hormonal control products. Preliminary results of the FDA-funded study suggest an approximately 1.5-fold increase in the risk of blood clots for women who use drospirenone-containing birth control pills compared to users of other hormonal contraceptives. Given the conflicting nature of the findings from 6 published studies evaluating this risk, as well as the preliminary data from the FDA-funded study, FDA has scheduled a joint meeting of the Reproductive Health Drugs Advisory Committee and the Drug Safety and Risk Management Advisory Committee on December 8, 2011 to discuss the risk and benefits, and specifically the risk of blood clots of drospirenone-containing birth control pills. Patients should talk to their healthcare professional about their risk for blood clots before deciding which birth control pill to use. Known risk factors that increase the risk of a blood clot include smoking, being overweight, and family history of blood clots, in addition to other factors that contraindicate use of birth control pills. Additional information for patients. If your birth control pill contains drospirenone, do not stop taking it without first talking to your healthcare professional. Discuss any questions or concerns about your birth control pill with your healthcare professional. Know the symptoms of blood clots, including persistent leg pain, severe chest pain, or sudden shortness of breath. Contact your healthcare professional immediately if you develop any of these symptoms. Side effects from the use of birth control pills should be reported to the FDA MedWatch program. This month of September 2011, the FDA issued drug safety communication informing the public of an ongoing safety review of the anti-nausea drug Zofran, active ingredient ondansetron hydrochloride, and their generics. Ondansetron may increase the risk of developing abnormal changes in the electrical activity of the heart, which can result in a potentially fatal abnormal heart rhythm. Prolongation of the QT interval of the electrocardiogram, or EKG, can lead to an abnormal and potentially fatal heart rhythm, including torsade de pointe. Patients at particular risk for developing torsade include those with underlying heart conditions such as congenital long QT syndrome, those who are predisposed to low levels of potassium and magnesium in the blood, and those taking other medications that can lead to QT prolongation. On September 1, 2011, the FDA issued a drug safety communication informing the public that FDA has approved an update to the drug label for Reclast, active ingredient zoledronic acid, to better inform healthcare professionals and patients of the risk of renal failure. Renal failure is a rare but serious condition associated with the use of Reclast in patients with a history or risk factors for renal impairment. Cases of acute renal failure requiring dialysis or having a fatal outcome following Reclast use have been reported to FDA. Those labeling changes are being made to the Reclast label only, although zoledronic acid, also sold as Zometa, is approved for treatment of cancer-related indications. Renal toxicity is already addressed in the warnings and precautions section of the Zometa label, as well as in the Reclast label. Dose reductions for Zometa are provided for patients with renal impairment. Risk factors for developing renal failure include underlying moderate to severe renal impairment, use of nephrotoxic or diuretic medications at the same time as Reclast, or severe dehydration occurring before or after Reclast is given. The risk of developing renal failure in patients with underlying renal impairment also increases with age. At this time, FDA recommends that healthcare professionals be aware that Reclast is contraindicated in patients with creatinine clearance less than 35 mL per minute or in patients with evidence of acute renal impairment. Patients should continue to be screened prior to each administration of reclass to identify those with underlying acute or chronic renal impairment, advanced stage, or dehydration. Patients with underlying renal impairment appear to be at highest risk for kidney failure. Reclass should be used with caution in this population. The risk of acute renal failure may increase with underlying renal disease and dehydration secondary to fever, sepsis, gastrointestinal losses, diuretic therapy, etc. The risk of developing renal failure in patients with renal impairment also increases with age. Creatinine clearance should be calculated before each dose of reclass. Interim monitoring of creatinine clearance should be performed after reclass dosing in at-risk patients. Creatinine clearance should be calculated based on actual body weight using the Cockcroft-Gault formula. And continuing on with adverse drug effects, on September 1st, the Food and Drug Administration issued a drug safety communication warning the public that serious allergic reactions have been reported with the use of the antipsychotic medication Safras, active ingredient acenapine maleate. A search of the FDA's Adverse Event Reporting System database identified 52 cases of type 1 hypersensitivity reactions with Safras use. Hypersensitivity reactions can be classified into 4 categories, type 1 to type 4. Signs and symptoms of type 1 hypersensitivity reactions may include anaphylaxis, angioedema, low blood pressure, rapid heart rate, swollen tongue, difficulty breathing, wheezing, or rash. These signs and symptoms are consistent with the reactions reported in the 52 cases. Several cases reported multiple hypersensitivity reactions occurring at the same time, with some of these reactions occurring after the first dose of Safras. Advisory committees provide FDA with independent opinions and recommendations from outside experts on applications to market new drugs and on FDA policies. The marketing applications include data to show the safety and effectiveness of human drugs. The outside experts receive summary information about the applications and copies of FDA's review of the application documents. Based on this information, advisory committees may recommend approval or disapproval of a drug's marketing application. FDA generally follows an advisory committee's recommendation but is not bound to do so. A calendar of pending meetings up through December 2011 is available on the FDA's website. On September the 8th, 2011, a committee was to discuss a new drug application, NDA, for rivaroxaban tablets submitted by Johnson & Johnson Pharmaceutical Research and Development, LLC, on behalf of Ortho McNeil Janssen Pharmaceuticals for the prevention of stroke and systemic embolism, blood clots other than in the head, in patients with non-valvular atrial fibrillation, abnormally rapid contractions of the atria, the upper chambers of the heart. The drug, a new molecular entity, was already approved by the FDA in July 2011 to prevent blood clots associated with hip or knee replacement. For September 14, 2011 morning session, the committee was to discuss an NDA for a drug with a proposed trade name Feraprox. Deferiprone, film-coated tablets, application submitted by Apo Pharma Incorporated, represented by Cato Research, Ltd., authorized U.S. agent. The proposed indication for this product is for the treatment of patients with transfusional iron overload, excess iron in the body related to blood transfusions, when current chelation therapy is inadequate. Chelation therapy in these patients binds iron in a form that allows it to be eliminated from the body. Deferiprone has been used in the U.S. on a compassionate use basis. Compassionate use is for drugs which are not currently FDA approved. For compassionate use, a physician ascertains that the manufacturer of the unapproved drug is willing to provide the drug and then submits an investigational new drug application, IND, to obtain an unapproved drug for an individual patient. During the afternoon session of this same date, the committee was scheduled to consider the development of products for the treatment of patients with non-metastatic castration-resistant prostate cancer who have a rising serum level of prostate-specific antigen, PSA, despite being on androgen deprivation therapy. There are no products currently approved for this indication. No specific products were to be presented or discussed. Rather, the committee was asked to consider possible trial designs and suitable clinical endpoints to establish efficacy that would support a labeled indication for treatment of non-metastatic castration-resistant prostate cancer after PSA progression on androgen deprivation therapy. Because androgen deprivation therapy is an unapproved therapy for this condition with serious long-term toxicity, the committee was asked whether approval of a new therapy in conjunction with continued androgen deprivation therapy would be appropriate for patients with non-metastatic castration-resistant prostate cancer. Genetics has become a common topic. Use of DNA typing was introduced in the mid-1980s and has become a part of law enforcement. In 2000, there was the sequencing of the human genome, and subsequently came a world of genomic medicine. The New England Journal of Medicine began a new series of articles on genomic medicine, beginning with the August 26, 2010 issue. In Journal Focus, an article entitled Genomic Medicine, Genomics, Healthcare and Society is in the September 15, 2011 issue of the New England Journal of Medicine. The article points out that there are more than 1,600 genetic tests available to patients and consumers, but the FDA does not review the majority of these. However, recently the FDA announced intentions to begin risk-based oversight of laboratory-developed tests, and the National Institutes of Health, NIH, is developing a genetic testing registry to provide a centralized source of information on genetic tests available. Regarding privacy, genomic data cannot be fully de-identified, but researchers can request a certificate of confidentiality from the Secretary of Health and Human Services to allow them to choose whether to disclose data under subpoena. To prevent discrimination on the basis of genetics, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act of 2008, GINA, was designed. GINA took effect on December 7, 2009 to prevent denied enrollment by insurance companies or increased premiums, and prohibits an insurer from requesting or requiring a genetic test. GINA also prevents employment-related decisions such as hiring, firing, job assignments, or any other terms of employment. However, GINA's provisions do not apply to situations listed here, including those receiving care through the Department of Veterans Affairs. Additionally, GINA does not apply to educational or athletic programs. For example, the National Collegiate Athletic Association began mandatory testing for sickle cell trait for students in Division I athletics. GINA is enforced by the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Labor, the Department of Treasury, and the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission. Violators must provide corrective action and pay monetary penalties. The article does contain a section on drug therapy examples. Pharmacogenetics matches the genetic profile to the likely effect of particular drugs. Some of the drug examples with FDA recommendations on genetic testing include testing for adverse effects for abacavir, a medicine used in HIV, azathioprine, used in kidney transplantation and rheumatoid arthritis, carbamazepine, used in trigeminal neuralgia. Other examples, checking to see how well the drug might work, that is, efficacy, for certain cancer medicines, and blood thinners like clopidogrel. Some examples also include dose adjustment considerations to lessen adverse effects. Thank you for watching this first episode of The Pharmacy Doctor.